Hey y'all, it's Megan. If you're returning to my channel, welcome back, and if you're new, welcome aboard. So today I am finally, as you can see from my favorite hat in the world, going to be doing Haunted Mansion history and trivia. It's going to be a long one, so if you are into trivia videos, then go ahead, get yourself a snack and strap in, because this one's going to take a little while. If you're not interested in trivia, then please click up there or down there and go find a Storytime video to enjoy. On this lovely rainy day, I always film in my car when it's raining, I swear. I don't do it on purpose, it's just, I'm at work and that just happens to be what the weather is today. So yeah, today we are talking about the history and trivia of the Haunted Mansion. So I'm going to kind of combine Disneyland and Disney World. I'm going to talk mainly about Disneyland because that was the original one, and a lot of things are the same as far as the history goes from the two, and then the trivia and the fun facts are going to be a little bit different between the two. But for the most part, the history of the Haunted Mansion starts at Disneyland, and that's kind of where we're going to stay. Walt wanted in the 50s to make a haunted house attraction. That was a pretty common thing back in the day, you know, even like the boardwalks and stuff, they had like these haunted houses that you would walk through, and they were like fun halls with the weird mirrors, and anyone else having like Us flashbacks, like whew, ugh. Anyway, so Walt kind of wanted that kind of thing from the very beginning, before Disneyland was ever developed. They couldn't really get it going for when Disneyland opened, but it was still always at the back of his mind, in the back of the Imagineers' minds. You know, we want to have this haunted attraction at some point. Well, they finally came up with an idea, and I put that in quotes and I use it very loosely. They decided to do a haunted attraction and started creating the building for it. They had no idea what they wanted to put inside it. That's why I say they came up with an idea. So they started construction in 61, and it actually finished construction in 63. They based the outside. Walt really wanted it to be a pretty building. You know, a lot of haunted houses were kind of derelict and like decrepit and broken down, and Walt was like, no, we don't do that in my park. So we'll take care of the outside, the ghosts will take care of the inside, is what he always said. So the inside could look all, you know, haunted and creepy and broken down, but the outside needed to be pristine and well kept and kind of fit with the rest of Disneyland. So they took inspiration from old Victorian houses, and they looked at the Shipley Lydecker house in Baltimore, Maryland, which is unfortunately now I think an apartment complex is where it used to be. But they derived architectural inspiration from that house, and if you compare the two side by side, you can definitely see how it inspired the look of the Haunted Mansion that you know in Disneyland today. So they had the idea for the outside. They were like, good, we're gonna make this haunted house. This is great, let's build it. Started building it in 1961, got done by 1963. They had hoped to open by 1963, but a couple of things happened. One, they still did not know what they wanted the attraction to actually be. Is it gonna be a walkthrough? Is it gonna be a ride? Is it going to be fun? Is it gonna be scary? We have no idea what the storyline is for this thing, what it's even gonna be, but we have a building. And the other thing that happened was the 1964-65 World's Fair was coming up. So Walt really wanted his like main Imagineer guys to focus on some of the things that were premiering there and the technologies that were gonna be coming out and being shown at the World's Fair. That was kind of where the focus was. So this Haunted Mansion thing just kind of, yeah, there's a building there, there's nothing inside it, we don't know what's going to go inside it, but we're going to focus on the World Fair, which turned out to be kind of a good thing, because they actually got some of the technology from the World Fair to use in the ride. I'll talk about the omnimovers a little bit later, but that was a piece of technology that premiered at that World's Fair in New York that they later integrated into the Haunted Mansion. So I've mentioned that they really didn't know what the attraction was going to be. Walt really wanted it to be a walkthrough attraction, kind of like a wax museum, where you walk through and you see all the like the museum of oddities kind of stuff. You know, you look, oh, there's a creepy thing there, and look at this statue, and look at this weird painting, and he wanted you to walk through and be able to be, you know, kind of a self-guided meandering tour. There was talks that there would be maids and butlers that would escort you on your tour through this. They actually had Imagineers go to the Winchester Mystery House in California, which if you've watched the movie Winchester, or you've read the lore, or you've been on the tour, it was a creepy house that the heir to the Winchester rifle fortune, she kept building on it, and there was like doorways to nowhere, stairs to nowhere, lots of weird stuff, and they had walking tours through that facility. So they were looking into that, like, okay, how do they get all these people through this building in a timely fashion? How do they get people to stay focused? How do they manage capacity? So they looked at that weird House of Horrors kind of thing to see, how can we run this tour through this haunted mansion that we're creating? So that was another well-known house that was an inspiration. It wasn't an inspiration architecturally, but based on how they actually ran the business side of that house, that was another inspiration for the Disney version. A couple of well-known guys that were working with Walt when he was still alive, because he had this initial idea that they talked about many years before he actually passed. Ken Anderson, who was a well-known animator, and he kind of did the architectural side. He was working with Walt on this, and also our friend Harper Goff, if you remember from our Jungle Cruise video. I'll link that up there if you haven't seen it and down in the description. But Harper was another one of the Imagineers that worked very early on in all these well-known attractions, and he was involved talking with Walt. Walt passed away in '66, and the Haunted Mansion did not open at Disneyland until August of 1969. So this was the first attraction that kind of, you know, really had none of Walt in it that opened at Disneyland. After Walt passed, and it wasn't as much up to Ken Anderson and Harper Goff anymore, it moved into the hands of some newer Imagineers, namely Rolly Crump and Yale Gracie, which, if that name sounds familiar, is for a good reason. He was the one who did a lot of the special effects work. The Hatbox Ghost, if you've heard of that little character, he was the one who kind of pioneered that, and he also worked a lot with the special effects of the Pepper's Ghost effect that you see in both Haunted Mansions in Disneyland and Disney World. So they went through lots of different ideas for the story and the tone of the Haunted Mansion. There were two main guys who kind of went back and forth on, should it be scary? Should it be fun? Should it be scary? Should it be fun? The fun guy was Mark Davis, which is another callback to our Jungle Cruise video. He was one of the guys who kind of wanted the gags and the funnies to be in Jungle Cruise, and here he is again wanting the Haunted Mansion to have some funnies going on with it. And the other one was Claude Coates, and he was the one who wanted it to be scary. He's like, if it's haunted, it's scary. Let's go with that. So they went back and forth on that. They also went back and forth on what is the actual storyline of this attraction. There was a lot of different, there was a bride who found out a secret backstory about her husband-to-be, and she committed suicide, or he pushed her out the window. There's all of these stories that go with that. They thought about doing a Sleepy Hollow with Ichabod Crane, the Headless Horseman. That was an idea that they had at one point. There have been lots of different ideas for what the story was going to be, and there's lots of speculation on what the story is that you're following through in the Haunted Mansion. But in reality, what they settled on, as far as I can tell from my research, is it's a retirement home for ghosts. Everything that the ghost host says implies that when you die and you are a ghost, this is a place that you can come and retire after you have left your corruptible mortal state. So that is kind of what the actual story of the Haunted Mansion is intended to be. Y'all, you'd think after 3 years and some of doing this that I would remember to actually, you know, charge my camera batteries and stuff, but here we are. So I'm on my phone now. Sorry about the change in audio and video quality, and it's going to be a little bit shakier now since I'm on my phone. But proceeding where we left off, I mentioned that the omnimover technology that was at the 64-65 World's Fair was going to be very important in the development of the Haunted Mansion. The concern with having a walkthrough attraction was keeping up the capacity. They didn't want people to be meandering and taking their time and looking at things leisurely, and then you don't have as many people who can come into the attraction. So they were like, okay, well, let's do a ride. But then if you're doing a ride, how do you keep people focused on what you want them to see? And that was where the omnimover came in. It was a continuously moving vehicle system where you get on and you keep moving as you're boarding the vehicle. It's continuously moving, and that ride vehicle rotates and turns so that you face the things that they want you to see. So that's, you know, you notice when you're going through the portrait gallery, you turn and you see the lightning flash from the window that's behind you up against those portraits. Then they turn you back around and you are facing what they intend for you to see, but you're also kind of moving at that pace where it's like you're walking through a house, you're taking a tour, you are getting the full experience, but they're also kind of like keeping the pace up, keeping it moving to make sure that everyone who wants to come into the Haunted Mansion can come in and get the same experience. That is kind of the history of the creation of the Haunted Mansion, specifically at Disneyland. And now I'm going to move into Disney World before I do the fun facts. So they figured out what the attraction was actually going to be. They opened it up. We're good to go. We go to put it in Disney World, want to keep it the same. It's more or less the same attraction. A lot of the same imagery is in there. The exteriors, however, are very different. One in New Orleans Square at Disneyland is obviously, even though it was based on a building in Baltimore, it's obviously much more plantation style. Looks more like it belongs in New Orleans. And the one at Disney World is actually based on the Harry Packer mansion in Pennsylvania. And it was a more Gothic looking piece of architecture, but still it has that very classic look. It's very, well kept on the outside. You can tell that the grounds are maintained. And again, the ghosts are the ones who are taking care of the inside. But there are a couple of differences between the two rides as far as the fun facts go. At both attractions in Disneyland and Disney World, you can see the tombstones outside, and they have names that may sound familiar to you, and that's because they are based a lot of the time on Imagineers or other people who worked on the attraction. You will notice Grandpa Mark, who is Mark Davis, Brother Claude, who is Claude Coates. Those are a couple of them that you will see. You'll also see Madame Leota, and Madame Leota is based on an Imagineer in a few different ways. There was an Imagineer named Leota Toombs who worked at Disneyland. And you may be like, oh, okay, so that's based on her. Madame Leota is based on her. It is not only based on her name-wise, it's also her face. She was the one who did the video of Leota that they project into the ball. So when she is floating around doing her seance and everything, that is Leota Toombs' face. They did not use her voice. They used the voice of Eleanor Audley, who is, I've mentioned before, one of my favorites. She's the voice of Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty. She's also Lady Tremaine from Cinderella. Got that kind of gravelly, very ominous voice. She's the voice of Leota. Even though Eleanor Audley was the voice of Madame Leota, you can actually hear Leota Toombs' real voice. She is the little Leota at the end of the ride that says, "Don't forget to bring your death certificate," and she says, "Hurry back." That's actually Leota Toombs. While I'm talking about voices, I will go ahead and mention that our boy Thurl Ravenscroft, that I've mentioned in basically every one of these trivia videos, it seems, he makes a couple of appearances in the Haunted Mansion as well. He's the one that sings Grim Grinning Ghosts, so there's that voice. He's one of the tombstone, or one of the busts in the graveyard scene. And there's also a special nod to him in the interactive queue at Walt Disney World, the pipe organ on there, where it's like a brand of the organ. It says Ravenscroft. So that's another nod to our boy Thurl, who is of course the voice of Tony the Tiger and sings the You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch songs. And one more voice that you may recognize is that of Paul Frees, who is the ghost host. He is probably most well known for being Boris in the Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons, and also he is Ludwig von Drake, the uncle of Donald. He's Donald's uncle, isn't he? Cousin? What is he? What is Ludwig von Drake to Donald Duck? They're related somehow, but he's like the German scientist, mathematician, Duck. And so that's who Paul Frees is. He plays that character as well, and he is also the ghost host. Now we can move on to a couple of the fun facts about the attractions. At both of them, you can find hidden Mickeys. It's probably one of the most well-known hidden Mickeys and one of the most obvious. It's in the plates in the ballroom scene. You can see it moves around sometimes, but there's usually a Mickey head made from the plates on the table at the ballroom scene. And another fun little Easter egg that's in the ballroom scene at Disneyland specifically is the pipe organ that's off on the left. The ghost that's playing that pipe organ. That organ is actually a real prop from the movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. After that movie was done, they had the organ and some of the set pieces from that movie on display in Tomorrowland at Disneyland, and people loved seeing them. And then once that display ended, then they were like, hey, let's keep using this. So they put it into the Haunted Mansion when it opened up. All the others that are at the other Disney parks, though, are obviously just replicas. But that one is actually the original 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea organ. Although Disneyland and Disney World's versions of Haunted Mansion are very similar, there's one big difference. And people always ask, are you going up or down in the stretching room? When the portraits stretch, where are you going? Is the ceiling rising up? Are we going down? What's happening there? And the answer is both. Depends on where you are. At Disneyland, because there's so little space there, when they built the attraction, the show building had to be actually like outside of the Disney bubble. So you actually have to go down in an elevator, and there's like a walkway that you're going through to get to the show building. So you are actually going down and over. And in Walt Disney World, there was plenty of space when they built Disney World, so they weren't concerned with, you know, having to get you to a show building. The show building is actually just right behind the mansion facade, so the ceiling just rises up, you're in the same spot, you don't move. So that's the answer to that age-old question. Couple more little fun things that are at the Disney World specific Haunted Mansion. You can see a hidden Donald. Again, I'm using quotes because I don't know if it's official, but I've heard it said. I've always thought that it looked like it. I don't know if it's official or not, but the chair that is the big purple chair that's sitting right beside the endless hallway, it's supposed to be an abstract hidden Donald. And I'll put a picture in here if I can find one that's clear enough, but see what you think if you think that this is actually a hidden Donald on this chair. My husband he still has not seen it. I've pointed it out like 600 times and he still is like, I don't see Donald. So maybe my eyes are just seeing what they want to see, but let me know. Do you see a Donald in this chair? Yes, no, am I crazy? One last little Easter egg that's not actually in the attraction, but it's part of the attraction. Each Haunted Mansion attraction in Disney World, Disneyland has a pet cemetery, but the one at Disney World has a special member, and that is in the back corner. You can see Mr. Toad, and that's just, you know, to honor the fact that Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is dead to Disney World. The last fun fact that I have about the Haunted Mansion, and specifically the Disney World Haunted Mansion, is one that I just really, really like, and it's not really an Easter egg. It's kind of like a whodunit murder mystery within the Haunted Mansion, and you can only see it if you go through the full queue. I believe the Fast Pass queue bypasses it, but if you've ever been in line at the Haunted Mansion and you've seen these busts standing there, it's like a whole family of busts on these pedestals, and they've all got little things underneath them, and they're all holding stuff. One guy's got a snake, one guy's like lording over his money. That is the Dread family, and if you read their you read the stuff that's on their little pillars, and you look closely at them, there are clues as to how each person died and who killed who. And you kind of, while you're standing there in line, it's something to do. Just look through, figure out how people died, who was murdered by whom, and it's just a fun little whodunit that you can kind of take on your own while you're standing there in line. So that is it for Haunted Mansion trivia. Thanks for hanging in there. If you're still here, whoop. It was fun to research. It's one of my favorite attractions, and I think that it's a lot of people's favorite attraction. Let's do something here. What is your favorite storyline that you've heard that goes with the Haunted Mansion? I think everyone has heard some kind of story that's, you know, you are the one who's died. There's a bride that's been killed. The girl on the stretch portraits is the one in the attic. What's your story that you've heard? Let me know down there. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that little red button so that you can become part of the Jungle Crew and join me on all my fun Disney adventures. Not at Disney right now, obviously, but yeah. So that's it for today, guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, y'all.